Welcome to my project to review all of Elton John's studio albums. Before I go any further, I'd just like to thank all those who have commented both on YouTube and Facebook on these videos. Many people have written in to say how they disagree with my ratings, and that's absolutely fine because it's all done in such a generous spirit. I really do welcome what you've been saying. We're all Elton John fans and we all love his music. We just love some tracks more than others. So many thanks for those. And I'd just like to give a shout out to Lawrence from The Vinyl Life and also to John Heaton. I've been watching both of their videos reviewing Elton John albums and they're really interesting and very well informed. So thanks to those. I'll put a link below. So today we're looking at Rock of the Westies. This was Elton John's 10th studio album, issued in 1975, following Captain Fantastic and preceding Blue Moves, both of which I have reviewed before. It reached number 5 in the UK charts and number 1 in the US charts. There were some changes though in the band, and we saw here that Nigel Olsson, drummer, and Dee Murray on bass had disappeared from the previous album. What happened there? Was this a phone call Elton made to them saying, sorry, you're not needed for the next album? Or did they just hear that an album was being made and they hadn't been contacted? Interesting how these things happen. So it was a new feel to the band, and you definitely see a significant difference here from Captain Fantastic. So let's have a look at what the album looks like. Here's the vinyl version, just a close-up there of Elton on the front. Quite a nice sort of colour design on that. This comes through well on the CD issue. On the back we've got a picture of the band looking pretty relaxed after the recording there. And here's some of the individuals involved on the sleeve and on the sleeve the other side there. You get an insert here with the lyrics, all done in this kind of handwriting style. A little bit difficult to follow sometimes, but a decent package when you get the vinyl. There's a different feel to this album with its stories of prostitutes, drug taking and gang culture. It's quite edgy, and this was perhaps an attempt to get more of a Rolling Stones or the Who feel to some of the music. And you definitely hear that in Elton's vocals on this record. The liner notes say it was not one of Elton's masterpieces, and we probably agree with that. It was the last album he made with Dick James Music. UltimateClassicRock.com put this one as 29th out of Elton's 32 studio albums. Well, I'm going to grade each track and let's see if that stands up. They describe it as a massive stumble in a brilliant period. Perhaps the result of sheer burnout, that so much was being demanded of Elton at this time. There were rumours of infighting amongst the musicians, and the result was a fairly anarchic sound. We're going to now look at each track in turn, give it a mark out of 10 and see how the album comes out. The first song on the album is An Oddity. It's a medley of 3 different songs, Yell Help, Wednesday Night and Ugly, all appearing as one track. It's quite clever in the way it's woven together, and at the end we get all 3 tracks going over the top of each other, a bit like a round. The problem is that Yell Help doesn't really have much of a melody. And we know that because it's never been played live. It's never had an airing in a concert. Elizabeth Rosenthal, in her book on Elton John, describes it as having a theme of barbarism, sexism and hell-raising. The vocals are a long way back, something I don't like in Elton's songs generally. And it's an odd choice to start the album off, really. It blends into Wednesday Night, a story about loneliness, and having only 4 lines. It doesn't have an awful lot to say and is something of very little consequence, as it blends into Ugly, which is a New Orleans story of a woman who was ugly. It's a very harsh, rocky tune. Ray Cooper gives some good instrumentation on this. It's described as a crude rhapsody about ugly women. And to me, this is a fairly meaningless end to a meaningless trilogy of music, which descends into a bit of a mess, to be honest. And this is one, don't have many skip over tracks on an Elton CD, but this is certainly one for me. I'm giving this one only 2 out of 10. Not the finest day at the office. Track 2 is Dan Dare, Pilot of the Future, a tribute to the comic book superhero Dan Dare and his arch-enemy, the Mekon. I had to look that one up, by the way. This has a kind of jazzy feel to it, an impressive guitar solo from Davy Johnston, but it also has this voice box guitar sound on it, which is a bit irritating and not very pleasant. There are a few sort of carry-on style double entendres in it, and there may be some echoes of Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. Also, though, the theme picks up on this enchantment with fictional characters, maybe a bit like the Roy Rogers song on Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and of course the Captain Fantastic metaphor. Overall, though, the harsh rock voice that Elton uses on this is interesting, but it grates after a while. There's some hooks in it, okay, but in terms of songwriting, this only gets 4. Remembering that I'm giving those really high marks to top quality songs. For instance, in my last video, I gave 2 9s and an 8 to Leave On an Indian Sunset and Tiny Dancer. So I am giving those high scores to quality songs, but compared with those, Dan Dare rates a 4. Track number 3 is Island Girl, which was a single and reached number 1 in the United States, number 14 in the United Kingdom. It's about a Jamaican prostitute. It has been described by Ultimate Class Rock as a mildly racist love song. It's one of those songs that's of its time, and now when we look back, there's some rather uncomfortable mimicking of the Caribbean dialect. What you want in indie white man's world. I don't think that would be acceptable as a lyric now from a white singer. But of its time, it was popular and it struck a chord. There's some fantastic piano from Elton in this, and there is undoubtedly a good hook in this. It is a memorable tune. It's a pleasant tune. It makes you think of summer. It makes you think of those songs like We're Going to Barbados from the 1970s. So as a single, you can understand why it was successful and it captured a particular time. Perhaps no longer one that we're going to hear sung live, but we're going to give this one 6 out of 10. Again, compared with Elton's finest songs, it's just about sort of in the middle there, I would say. Track number 4 is Grow Some Funk of Your Own. This was another United States single, part of a double A-side with I Feel Like a Bullet. It was written with Davy Johnson. It has kind of a Rolling Stones feel to it as well. This is another song about a prostitute. A young man travels to a border town to a cantina and gets in trouble when he's flirting with a senorita who belongs to someone else. There are some spoken comments between the verses which are quite amusing, like, oh, he was so macho, and we enjoy that contribution from Elton. Some quality instrumentation here on percussion from Ray Cooper, castanets, and a very delightful vibraphone on this. Again, there's a harsh rock and roll voice from Elton. It must have been quite tiring to sing this and stay in that mode. Perhaps some echoes of Saturday Night as well on this one, especially the melody in the verses I found. There's a good vibe overall to this, and it's an enjoyable rock and roll song. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it does benefit from repeated listening, this one. So I would say it's a pretty good song here. I'm going to give this one 6 out of 10. The last song on the first side of the vinyl is I Feel Like a Bullet in the Gun of Robert Ford. This is a cinematic story telling of Robert Ford, who killed the outlaw Jesse James. It's a poignant power ballad. It's a good song, I think. It's powerful and inspiring, and for me this is the standout track on this album. There's another sort of old Wild West setting for this one, a bit like Tumbleweed. A man is feeling guilty after breaking with his girlfriend. I like the lyrics from Bernie Taupin here. I'm low as a paid assassin is. I'm cold as a hired sword. The verse to me is much stronger than the refrain. In the refrain, Elton again chooses this falsetto high range, which for me is a little bit disappointing. And I'd like to see him record this with a lower range refrain, because it is a good quality song. The piano sounds great in the verses. The vibraphone from Ray Cooper again is very effective. Lines like I had lost what should have been found, very emotive. So for me, the standout track on the album, we're going to award this one 7 out of 10. And remember, we're talking about Tiny Dancer at 8, we're talking about Leave On at 9, so we're getting into that range of Elton's finest songs. So let's summarise that first side. We've got a 2, 4, 6, 6 and a 7. So it definitely got off to a very rocky start, if you'll forgive the pun there. And it scored 25, not his finest side of vinyl by any means, but a reasonable opener, I would say. Side 2 opens with Street Kids. This has a driving introduction with cascading piano from Elton. It's described by AllMusic as a ballsy, no-nonsense rocker. Again, it has this feeling of Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, this idea of juvenile delinquency. Apparently it's about aimless working class kids who are drawn to the gang culture. It was used in the Grand Theft Auto computer game, interestingly. There's heavy guitars on it. The verse, though, is rather repetitive, not an interesting melody. It's fairly dull, and it's another one of those songs where there's a big key change for the refrain. That doesn't always work. The lyrics, not Bernie Taupin's greatest hour on this one, I'm afraid. It's okay, but not much more than okay for me, and we're going to give this one a 5 out of 10. Track number 7 is Hard Luck Story, a track originally recorded by Kiki D. It's Elton's own creation, this apparently, because it has this Orson Cart composer credit, which of course was a creation by Elton himself. There's some energetic piano on it, which is really enjoyable. It has a soulful feel, but rather confusing lyrics about a man coming home and returning to his wife after a rough day, and it could have worked better as a duet. Now the start is very reminiscent of Crazy Water. In fact, when you listen to it, you expect Elton to come in with the first line of Crazy Water. And this does happen, of course, on the next album, which included that song, which I rate as a much better song than this one. The verse has strong guitars and a decent melody, but the refrain is rather tedious and sort of lets it down a little bit. It's an ordinary song. It's okay as an album filler, but we can only give this one 4 out of 10. Track number 8 is called Feed Me. This is a dark, brooding tale from the point of view of a drug addict, the sadness and the madness of a drug addict. There's no Elton piano on this one, but what we do have are some delicious harmonies on this. It's one of Elton's finest melodies on this album. It has a kind of pleading vocal, and it has that sort of sound that's a little bit like a single man, actually, that sort of vocal. So he's looking a little bit ahead here in the way he's presenting this song. There's a driving drum beat which complements the desperate vocal somehow. Is this an unhappy Elton reflecting how he was feeling at the time when he was recording this album? And it's kind of speaking through Bernie's lyrics. I definitely recommend you listen to this one, though. I think it's a pretty good quality cut, this one. We're going to give it a 6 out of 10. Probably the second best song on this album. So the vinyl closes with Billy Bones and the White Bird. Billy Bones was the drunken pirate in Treasure Island, and the White Bird, well, could that refer to drugs, or could it refer to the albatross from the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner? Who knows? It's certainly a propulsive track. It's got heavy percussion with Ray Cooper standing out on kettle drums. But the lyrics are generally incoherent. And while he was practicing for this, apparently, Elton was experimenting with this phrase, check it out, which he could play in lots of different chords, one after the other. The problem is, when we get this on the refrain, it becomes so repetitive that it first becomes boring, then tedious, then just downright annoying. And in fact, you can't wait for this song to end. There's a strong, angry verse, which is enjoyable for a while, and slightly reminiscent of Benny and the Jets, the whole thing, except not such a good quality song, this one. And it's a shame that the vinyl draws to a close with such an irritating song, which we can only give 3 out of 10 to. Sorry about that. So side 2 closes after only 4 songs. We feel a little bit shortchanged by that. They scored 5, 4, 6 and 3, making it a total of 18, which is one of Elton's weakest sides of vinyl. If you have the CD version of this album, though, there's a little bonus track for it, and it's a great one to accompany the rest of the album. Don't Go Breaking My Heart was, of course, a duet between Elton and Kiki D. It's the story of a relationship, and it's almost the perfect pop song. It's engaging, it's easy to listen to. Its call and response pattern works really well. There's a lovely video of this they recorded in the studio, which has really stood the test of time despite those 70s fashions. This song reached #1 in both the United States and in the UK, the first time for Elton in the UK. The orchestral backing works really well with it. Possibly it goes on just a little bit too long, one refrain too many maybe, but we can put up with that because it's such a delight. For me, it's a defining song of that particular time, that summer, if it was summer when it came out, but it just captured that moment. And those songs which we associate with particular memories of ourselves really mean a lot to us, even when we hear them time and time again. So good bonus to have on this album. We're going to give it an 8 out of 10, putting it up with some of Elton John's finest recordings. So after I reviewed 6 albums so far, I think, let's see what's right at the top of Elton John's songs. We've still got Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word, Someone Saved My Life, Leave On, Indian Sunset and Madman as the top 5 tracks so far. Rock of the Westies' first entry down there is Don't Go Breaking My Heart, and that's of course not on the actual vinyl. So nothing from this album features right at the top of my list. But it does make a contribution to the bottom of the league so far. We can see Billy Bones only getting 3 there, and the opening medley, Yell Help, Wednesday Night and Ugly, only meriting 2 out of 10. So a couple of pretty weak tracks on that album. Interestingly, though, when we look at the average mark per track, the album Rock of the Westies comes in at 4.78. This puts it in 5th place so far out of the 7 albums I've reviewed. Madman Across the Water still way out in front. I think that's going to have some rivals soon when we look at some of Elton's other albums. Jump Up the weakest, although that's still a pretty good album, so I'd still enjoy listening to all of these albums, just that some I like more than others. So thanks for listening to my review of Rock of the Westies. Please subscribe to my channel if you want news of my other Elton album reviews. I'm going to go through the lot if that's possible. I welcome your comments. Feel free to disagree. And I'll see you next time. And don't forget, we're still standing.